Annyeong! Welcome to Delightful! There's a lot of dolls up here, but we're one short. That's right, the last of the evolutions is Flareon, the flame Pokemon. If you weren't familiar with the character, you might see it's a fire type and think, fire, huh? Its personality must be fierce, risky, destructive even. But Flareon is actually the kindest, most shy Pokemon of the whole bunch, although she does have some occasional sass. In Flareon's case, I feel it favors the life-giving warmth and passion of fire as opposed to its more destructive connotations. I looked for inspiration in sun-worshipping cultures, or countries and people that commonly use fire or sun imagery. Aztec and Mayan cultures were suggested to me, which definitely drip with iconic imagery and potential, but I ended up choosing a more modern-day Mexico as my main inspiration. I figured the whole super infamous violence and human sacrifice thing of the Aztecs wouldn't really convey the thoughtful, caring Flareon character I wanted to make. After a couple rough sketches exploring some different styles of Mexican blouses and dresses, these were my top 3. I was really favoring this one for its poofy silhouette, but you guys on Instagram pointed out that it looks a little wintry. After combining the best picks, we have our final concept. I'll be using Claudia Wolf's big sister body type, but with Rochelle Goyle's head. I wanted to switch Claudia's opened mouth smile to a more shy, closed lip smile, and Rochelle looks perfect to me. I know what some of you are thinking. Another girl? Those two brothers have an awful lot of sisters. Yes, well, for the most part I enjoy concepting and creating female dolls much more than males. Not sure what it is, the curves, the hair, but I just get so much more inspired to make girls. Also, Flareon is my big sister's favorite evolution, so I will admit I had her in mind while making this doll. After softening and removing Claudia's head and removing all of Rochelle's hair, take a razor to carefully remove seam lines on the legs. My Flareon is going to be rocking some short shorts, so I need the legs to look good. Umbreon's skin color changing pastel method worked so well, I felt I should do it again for Flareon. So I roughed up the body with a manicure sanding block to provide some tooth and got to work. Using a frayed brush and a combination of red and a little pumpkin orange, I began the slow process of coating the body again and again, giving each layer a thorough spray down with Mr. Super Clear. You have to wait 30 minutes in between each coat, so find a nice airy place to hang her. That's not creepy at all. It was looking really promising, and I did achieve a lovely burgundy sort of color with the pastels, but no matter how bright the new layer of pastel looked, the Mr. Super Clear would wet and darken the color. It took me 8 layers to achieve a solid color with Umbreon, and the value gap between his original skin color was much larger, so after I passed 8 coats with Flareon, I realized the problem with this method. No matter how many layers you build, the final color will always be a couple shades darker than the raw pastel. Naturally, I didn't notice this with Umbreon because I was already going for black. So to change your doll's skin to a lighter color, it would seem paint is the only option. So let's get out the airbrush and coat the doll's head and body. Actually, in this video, her body does look like the right red, but I promise she was too dark in real life. Something I wanted to talk about was the Pokemon's artwork. The most recent official drawing looks like this, but I remember Flareon looking like this. Pretty big shift in colors, right? Because it's the version I grew up with, I favor the hot red skin from the original, but I did use a blondish color for the hair as opposed to the mustard yellow. We'll get to that later. Seal in the paint with a watered down matte varnish, and don't forget to bend the joints to coat those areas too. Her knee's already chipping. What can you do? Let's set aside that hot mess and work on the clothes for a while. Her top consists of 2 long rectangles of fabric with a design painted on the edge. Keeping with a Mexican-ish graphic style, I painted on bright orange flames, then stitched on and turned down the yellow trim. Making a casing, then inserting elastic is how you do this on a human-sized top, but that's impossible on this small scale. So instead, I'm going to stitch the casing with the elastic already pinned down inside it. I secure one end of the elastic so it doesn't slip out, then start scrunching it together until the gather looks adequate. Tight gathers like this on a small scale want to stand out straight, so to make them behave, give it a firm pressing under your iron. This way you can force the folds to look more natural. The dress piece slips on under the bust so that it lays down flatter, and the top piece fits around the shoulders like so. I connect the 2 pieces with a couple small strips of hidden ribbon, Then tack down the top in several strategic places so that it quits bouncing up. I tried burning the edges of her pants, but the fabric just fell to pieces and got soot everywhere. So tattered him it is. After learning watercolor's shoemaking method, there's really no going back, so I use this technique again to make Flareon's boots. The gist of it is to protect the legs with tinfoil, create a paper mache cast, remove the cast once it's dry, and decorate them from there. Form the heels with epoxy sculpt or air dry clay and add a cute sun detail. Then cut out the peep toe using a jeweler's saw. I paint the shoe brown where I want the woven grass to go. Then glue down tan strips of paper layer by layer to create a woven reeds effect. Many traditional Mexican shoes have this look, and I thought it would look kind of like kindling to a fire in Flareon's case. I paint the front part white so nothing shows through, then painstakingly stitch on the fabric. I had to use pliers to get it through the thick cast, and it got harder to reach as I approached the toe of the boot. But I eventually did it, and I gotta say, it looks really cute, and I know it's really strong and won't pop off like glue might have. To finish up the boots, I paint the heels and add a cute paper bow, which I later switched to white fabric because apparently I wasn't paying attention to my own concept art. I dressed up the body to see if the outfit was working, and between the Mexican theme and the hot red skin, I couldn't help but think she looked like a chili pepper. Let's turn to accessories. I wanted Flareon to be sporting a firestone, presumably the one she used to evolve and is now keeping as a fashion statement. Using the cast epoxy method I made up for Glaceon, I form a jewel-shaped mold from plastic packaging and hot glue, mix up a puddle of epoxy glue, mix in some fiery colors and sparkles, then pour it in and wait for the cure time. I made two halves separately and joined them for a fully 3D firestone. Once fully cured, I removed it from the mold, coated it with a glossy varnish, and drilled a hole through the center. After stringing it onto brown embroidery thread and adding decorative beads, her charm is complete. We'll cinch in the waist with a couple wraparounds of brown embroidery thread, then tie on the charm. Time for that fluffy tail. Flareon's defining features the insane amount of fluffiness. So we're going to need a ton of combed yarn wefts. And this is where I want to give a huge shout out to my mom, who personally prepared all of Flareon's fur. I was actually sick with a pretty bad cold for the entire making of this doll, so I could not have finished this without her and my husband's help for that matter, so thank you guys! If you've watched the other Eevee videos, you know the drill by now. We make an armature wire skeleton, then slip it inside a casing made in the shape of the tail, then fill it with stuffing. Use the shredded fuzz that's left over for making the yarn wefts. Stitch it closed at the base, then work from tip to base stitching on the wefts. Using the glued ends as an anchor, whip stitch around and around, adding more wefts as you go, until eventually the entire tail is fluff-tastic. I added some bright yellow to the base as homage to the original. To set the tail in place, I drill a hole into her booty here and make it permanent with epoxy glue. Flareon also has the fluffiest neck fur of the bunch, so I formed a small airline travel neck pillow out of the same materials, and I'm going to stitch wefts around this too. Let's apply them in a way that radiates out from the center. I kept going until they were completely tucked under and met up with the first row I sewed on. Stitch on some metal snaps to close the shape around her neck and keep it in place on the top. And of course it could use a trim. Taking some more wire, stab a U shape into the head and out through the neck hole. Twisting the ends together and flattening the knot. Now pull that knot back inside the head, twist the wires together, and you've got a great armature for Flareon's ears. Taking and mixing equal parts of my favorite sculpting medium, epoxy sculpt, block out the rough shape of the ears. The first pass is just to flesh out the armature, and on the second pass I add more definition. Once it's cured, paint on some base colors. I didn't bother perfecting the ear shapes or smoothing out the epoxy, because we'll be gluing fur on top. so they look kinda wonky. But before we start gluing on wefts, let's give her a face. Before drawing anything, apply 2 or more coats of Mr. Super Clear UV Flat Matte Sealant. That's a mouthful. If you're new to doll customizing and want a complete list of materials and price estimate for this hobby, please check out this video. I'll link to it in the description and at the end. Now to start, add a little blush. I want her to have a no makeup look, so I'll be shading her with darker reds in the same color family as her skin. Next, I draw across the molding to form a half-closed eye look. I want to give her an expression that makes her look like the calmest and maybe the wisest and oldest sibling of the bunch. Then I added creases at the top of the eyelid and sketch in the iris. With a super sharp pencil, emphasize the lip crease. Remove any stray pastels with a kneaded eraser. Build up more details in the eyes. I'm using an indigo, but it's coming out black on the red skin. After another spray of sealant, I continue to detail the face by thickening the lash line and sketching in lower eyelashes. With a cream pencil, add highlights to the corners of the eyes and accentuate the creases. I also work in more pastels to add depth to the eyes, make them look more deeply set. Put a little pink near the tear duct and waterline. I love those details. The hardest part about this face was the cream colors, particularly the eyebrows, which were just not building up very quickly. Looks like the trying to go lighter problem is persisting with this doll. This was a first for me, downward-facing eyelashes on the top lid. I thought I'd give it a shot to make her eyes look like they really are half-closed. It felt funny drawing down into the eye whites, but the effect worked. Yay! After building the color as much as possible, let's switch from pencils to acrylics to add that final oomph. This entails adding opacity to the eye whites, eye shines, and eyebrows. This is also a good chance to bring out the blue in her eyes. She really is a striking primary color scheme. After the last coat of MSC, I paint on some gloss varnish to breathe life into those eyes and make the lips shiny. Even though the face looks pretty good, it's hard to ignore that bald head, so let's start filling that in, shall we? First, let's tackle the ears. Working from tip to base again, I glue on some loose yarn wefts. What's with the pink, you may ask? The answer? I didn't have red yarn. I thought I could be thrifty and use what I had to make things work, but yeah. So here's what happened. I used pink, the closest color I did have. Then, once the glue was dry, I came in with pastels and stained the yarn red. This worked so well with Eevee, I had confidence it would work again, but unlike Eevee's tail, I had no way to thoroughly wash the yarn with soap and water since I'd already attached the ears. In other words, it stained the yarn perfectly, but then wouldn't stop staining everything else it touched. Long story short, just go out and buy the right color. I finally did solve the problem by painting the ears with red acrylic, post-video. It sealed off the pastels and retained the fluffy shape of the yarn better than I feared. So it all worked out in the end. Starting at the base of the neck, paint on a layer of glue and start sticking on wefts. This yarn is blonde, but contrasted side by side with the red, it almost looks white. Well, it's too late. I'm sure not using pastels again. To form the part, glue a weft on backwards, wait for it to dry thoroughly, then flip it over. Voila! With a little trimming and taming, Flareon is done. Wow, we actually did it. All 9. That's a lot of EVs. We could use a vacation. This looks like a good spot. Come on out, guys. Stay artsy. 안녕.
Your mom's forcing him to wear it. He's like, help. Ow, ow.